I get inspired by listening to other people's songs and other records. I definitely go, I like that. I wouldn't. Well, it must have been great in the studio to do that. Or this gives me a tingle up the spine. I wouldn't. Oh, I'd like to play the bass to that. Or, you know. And I find myself going into Guitar Center and looking at some old Vox amp that the Beatles used to use and say, I must have that. I must play through that antiquated analog machine because it has so much history to it. So, inspiration, I think, comes from many different places, but I think specifically for me it's hearing music, you know, Arvo Pärt, his classical work. I just love his music, and I, you know, only recently discovered him, so when I play his music I get, it does definitely set me on a journey. I came across to America in the 80s with my own band called Q-Feel. We were a techno dance band. My partner was Brian Fairweather. There was just two of us, and he was a Scottish guitarist. And we'd released an album on a record on a label in London called Jive Records, and the single from that record in the 80s was called Dancing in Heaven, a real club track, very influenced by Ultra-vox. We were very much that kind of band. We had a sound which a lot of the bands had at that time, which was like Tom Dolby. Well, when I came to Los Angeles, Earth, Wind & Fire, who I'd idolized, and I'd, you know, got all their albums and followed them as a kid, thought they were phenomenal. They, through my manager, Diane Poncher and Cavallo Ruffalo, who managed Earth, Wind & Fire, said Earth, Wind & Fire were looking to change their sound. And through Diane, who was with Bob Cavallo, who managed Earth, Wind & Fire, they said, your sound and your vibe, like Maurice White, likes the sound of this kind of new synthesized techno music that's happening, and I think he was very influenced. Maurice White liked the sound of Blinded by Science, which was a song that Tom Dolby had out at that time. Well, Tom Dolby wasn't available, and Q-Feel, as reserve, we were available and we were open for work. We'll do anything to get in the studios with the American players, you know, and Earth, Wind & Fire to Brian and myself were, you know, and George Massenburg, who worked on their albums as an engineer, the sound of their records, we could never get. I think that's what happens to most English musicians. You know, even for the Beatles, they'd listen to Motown and go, what? How do we get that sound? And of course, in England, we're going, how do you get the Earth, Wind & Fire sound? It's so crisp, and the bass sounds so fantastic, and the way the drums are mixed. And a miracle took place, and where, you know, through my manager, Maurice White met with me. And we had a chat, just like I'm talking to you, and he was into changing their sound. And we got on. We really got on very well. I was very lucky to meet Maurice, and he was the first musician and producer that I worked with in Los Angeles. And he was inspirational, a gentleman, and I couldn't have come in, you know, at that time, I could have met up with the wrong people. I was a naive Englishman who just wanted to be in the studios, and there was a lot of drugs and a lot of crazy stuff going on, and here we were with Maurice White, who had his head screwed on, was spiritual, and wanted to teach us, and believed in Brian and myself. And we were unknown entities at that time with no great success except for an underground record that was pumping. So he was a brave man and a great man. He said, why don't you go away and write a song that maybe I can do on the next Earth, Wind & Fire record. And he said, you know, play me some stuff. And so I ran straight down to, I think it was Adray's, at one of these musical shops, bought a little Fostex 8-track, took it to the place I was renting and learnt it badly, bought a keyboard, and did this demo of trying to be what I thought Earth, Wind & Fire should be. And I wrote a song called Magnetic, which I took to him and he liked, because we went into the studios and we recorded it all live with Earth, Wind & Fire, and they let me. Verdine White was one of my heroes as a bass player, and he just said, you play the bass on this track, you know, and I'm in there playing bass with Earth, Wind & Fire. Had to change my underwear 15 times. You see, you come from England and we're all, get in the studio, record, get in, get out, and time is money, and, you know, and get it right. And Earth, Wind & Fire were like, you know, take it easy. Enjoy yourself. Just feel the tracks. And of course, you know, we turned up on time, but Earth, Wind & Fire had a different time schedule. They came 3 days later than we were supposed to be there. Yeah, and they came in and we're like, and they were like, hey man, when the groove is there, it's there. So it was really educational, and they dressed much better than we did. So we learned a lot about the kind of jewelry we should wear and how we should dress, and also, you know, it also was a great education on how to feel. I mean, we didn't have that much of a chance in England to make records in that kind of period of time that Earth, Wind and Fire were allowed to make great records. So it was that's how we met up, and luckily I wrote a couple of songs, quite a few at that period of time that brought me, Maurice and myself, very close together. And he brought me into when he worked on Barbra Streisand. He got me involved in writing with him for that, and also his solo record. It was, you know, I met with him recently. I bumped into him not very long ago, and it was great to see him again, and we had a great friendship. And I'll always remember, for a man who was so successful, that when we were making the Earth, Wind and Fire record, he would, and I was just renting a little house and, you know, really hadn't got going, he would come around at Christmas and bring Christmas gifts to my parents and to a lot of the band members and stuff. He was a genuine, and I worked with a lot of people after that, and they're all lucky to meet with a lot of good people, but Maurice was, as you say, a spiritual musician, and his heart was in the right place for, I think, also elevating black music in general into a very positive place with an uplifting nature, an incredible production. I mean, it was just to be in the room with him and watch how he was working was, and of course people that good don't look like they're working, it's just happening, but it's all to do with spirit and communication with other people. He taught me and my partner, I think, how to work in studios with musicians, you know, and how to get the best out of them. Because we definitely came from England, from a very tight English, you know, background. We didn't know how to swing, and we learned a lot.